Most people look at the crisis in Hillary Clinton's health and either want to downplay it or are delighted that she finally seems to be exposed as karma kicks in. But there's a constitutional crisis looming, and our country is headed toward the biggest morass of all time. With Trump pulling further ahead daily, this situation is custom-made to fulfill plans of the Washington establishment and the global elites to keep the status quo alive, no matter how. Short of his death, it seems clear that given a fair election, Donald Trump will win. And that means the level of trickery is about to go over the top, and our system isn't designed to handle what's ahead. Hillary Clinton's death, or the total inability to continue, could constitute the greatest opportunity for a scam that the electorate ever has seen. A massive shell game appears ready to take place. At a minimum, a large part of the country is about to cry foul. Did party elites know that when they nominated her? Surely they did. It appears that they thought they could keep her failing health under wraps until after the election at least. But that isn't happening. The elites say, never fear though, we have a backup that might even be better. Ever heard of a bait-and-switch scheme? That's about to become a very familiar term to Americans. With all of the uproar over Hillary's health, especially after her very public collapse at the 9/11 memorial service, questions about what will happen should she withdraw or die now are being asked. Few in the public seem to understand what's really at stake, and what we could be in for should that possibly occur, though crisis seems almost certain should she win the election. While that goal seems to be disappearing rapidly for her and appears more unlikely with each passing day, talk of voter fraud and election theft is increasing dramatically, so the possible scenarios have to be considered. The Washington establishment and the global elites who control them won't relinquish power easily, so we must prepare, if only so we can be ready for them and head them off. Believe it or not, what follows is a very general and brief overview. If it gives you any indication of the complexity of this topic, you're getting the picture, and you probably should begin praying. As far as we know, all of the following provisions come into play only if Hillary dies or voluntarily gives up her rights, either as a candidate or as a president-elect. While there have been situations where a sitting president has become incapacitated, and these are covered by the 25th Amendment passed in 1967, it doesn't govern what happens when there is no sitting president. Until then, there's no provision for the involuntary removal of a president-elect or a confirmed candidate who is still alive. There are technical rules that govern elections, and various scenarios could result. Two things seem clear, that Hillary Clinton is severely ill and the attempt to cover her illness is falling apart. Alleged leaked health records refer to her suffering from subcortical vascular dementia, probably caused by her fall and resulting injuries in 2012. This is a serious disease which gives patients a 3 to 5 year lifespan at most from diagnosis, and Hillary was diagnosed in 2013. It's a degenerative disease which can cause all of the symptoms seen in recent videos, and once debilitation becomes severe, it proceeds very quickly. According to a medical school professor, she probably has a year to live at most, and during that time, she'll become increasingly unable to function. There is also speculation about a brain tumor, which may have metastasized to her lungs, and there are more videos that can be watched on YouTube showing her symptoms and handlers scrambling with stretchers, EpiPens, ambulances, specially outfitted vans, and all the rest. It's clear she isn't going to last long, despite claims that she merely is suffering from pneumonia. Yet even with this, we should note that pneumonia isn't the common cold. It's called the old person's friend because it so often takes the elderly in a way that's less severe than other ends. So this isn't a walk in the park, even if it's all she has wrong. And while the leftist mainstream media and the global elites backing her wish or believe we are all stupid enough to buy that explanation, they've miscalculated. She's going down too hard and too fast to dupe very many people. Their attempts to cover merely have given her status as a liar growing impetus, at least as reflected in the polls. But most people have no idea where we're headed with this. What does all of this really mean, and what could we see occur? Hang on, because this is a bumpy road filled with lots of potholes and detours, and at best, confusion will reign in America, and we know who the author of confusion is: Satan. For those not spiritually inclined, merely look at the Soloninsky playbook and the Hegelian dialectic, best expressed by those on the left as crisis, reaction, solution. Or, in the words of Rahm Emanuel, you never let a serious crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before. That may be exactly what the establishment elites are gambling on at this point. There is no constitutional authority covering what might happen if certain scenarios play out, and no legal precedent for what course we'll take. Let's assume for the sake of argument that she does win the election. So what happens if she then steps down or dies? It depends on when that would occur. If it happened after the inauguration, the Constitution is clear that the office will go to the vice president. We've seen that before in history, most recently when John F. Kennedy was assassinated and Lyndon B. Johnson took over. But what happens if she dies or can't continue before the inauguration takes place on January 20th? Again, the timing is crucial. If she wins the general election, but the Electoral College, whose members are appointed by each state every 4 years in November, and which meets on the first Wednesday after the second Monday in December. How's that for a convoluted dating system? Hasn't yet met, there are a couple of options. This year, that would be December 14th. So if she's gone after November 8th, but before December 14th, the electors still would meet and vote. Some states require that electors give their votes to whomever won the popular vote in their state, but not all do so. To add to the confusion, 2 states, Nebraska and Maine, follow a proportional system for voting by members rather than a winner-take-all system. Conceivably, Electoral College members could be forced to elect somebody already dead, according to the 12th and 20th Amendments. This is problematic, obviously. Wouldn't Tim Kaine just become the president then? No, because he isn't technically the vice president until inauguration, just as Hillary isn't technically president until then either. Depending on which states she won, if enough of the states which provide her majority have electors which aren't bound, then they could vote for any Democrat they choose. A Democratic version of Joe the plumber, for instance, although someone like him is an unlikely choice. In that case, party officials most likely would choose someone else and pressure the delegates to support their choice. This would leave us with the familiar historical scenario of the smoky backroom deal and elites choosing who will head the country for the next 4 years, even though no one from the general public has voted for that person. How convenient is that for the Washington establishment who wants to retain their grip on power? But beyond this, even the Electoral College votes aren't final until they are confirmed by Congress on January 6th at the latest, as required by the U.S. Code. Until this count is officially confirmed by a joint session of Congress, there is some dispute as to whether there even is a president-elect at all. We said this would be a bumpy ride, and we're only at the beginning. If we get to Inauguration Day without a viable president-elect, then the vice president-elect will take over. But only until there is a qualified president. What does that mean? No one knows because it isn't specifically defined in the 20th Amendment, and there is no legal precedent for determining how we choose a qualified president or what the criteria are. Kaine wouldn't automatically become president, so in all likelihood, we'd have a fight in the courts while the nation waits with a temporary commander-in-chief. But that poses another problem since the current Supreme Court is lacking one member and is likely to split in a 4-4 decision on how to proceed. And how will the general population react if all this takes place and they learn that their votes don't even matter and they face the possibility of a nation run by someone they haven't voted for at all and know nothing about? But all of this is based on the idea that she'll be a viable candidate through the election. What happens if she dies before then? Those possibilities are equally troubling. According to rules laid down by the parties, which differ for Republicans and Democrats, then the party merely will appoint someone else to be the candidate. But even then it's murky because for Democrats, on whom we'll focus since we're discussing Hillary, the party elites would meet and choose a successor. Who would that be? Again, it could be anyone, because specific rules aren't in place. It wouldn't necessarily be the current vice presidential candidate or even the runner-up, who would be Sanders. If the Democratic convention got ugly with all of Sanders' supporters walking out when they learned how the process had been rigged in favor of Hillary, what would happen if she's forced to withdraw and they choose someone other than him to be the candidate, which appears likely? Currently, pundits such as Michael Savage and Roger Stone are speculating that should this occur, the most likely choice would be Michelle Obama. Yes, you heard that right. A person, we won't speculate on gender here, with no political experience and very little work experience, but who is a confirmed Marxist, just like her husband. We'd be guaranteed a third Obama term. Should that happen, then she wins, and we know that he wasn't hesitant about fulfilling the globalist agenda to destroy America. And she wouldn't be either, but that may be the game plan. It's well known that the Obamas hate the Clintons, yet he has gone out of his way to support Hillary and campaign for her. In the meantime, he has invested heavily in promoting a race war by backing Black Lives Matter and a host of other issues designed to cause confusion. Was he aware of her declining health when this began? Of course. But he has made much of the fact that he hates the idea of leaving the White House, just as Michelle repeatedly has reinforced the concept of hating the idea that she wakes up every day in a house built by slaves. Obviously, she's as good at creating division as her husband, and she's equally fond of taxpayer-funded vacations. But are there other alternatives? Naturally. As if all this wasn't confusing enough, Congress has the potential power to move or suspend elections. But that creates different problems. Article 2 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to set federal elections, subject to certain powers of the states and the executive branch, and they have done so, with that election date being the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, which this year falls on November 8th. While they don't have specific power to postpone or move election dates, they could pass a new statute, just as they did in setting the date originally, according to the 2004 Congressional Research Service Report. But if they move the federal election, where traditionally expiring congressional seats are voted on, along with a new president, beyond January 3rd, when current terms expire, they would in effect have voted themselves out of office. And who would certify the Electoral College vote? The only other option for them would be to move the election date past January 20th and allow the Speaker of the House to act as president until the entire situation could be resolved. This is neither likely nor palatable to most, according to Akil Reed Amar, a Yale Law School professor who addressed the topic back in 1994 in the Arkansas Law Review Journal of all places. However, if Congress fails to move the elections and the chaos from any of these scenarios ensue, given his history of using executive orders and wielding power in unprecedented ways, might Obama not merely declare martial law and suspend the election indefinitely? Not only is this a possibility, but some, including Dr. Ben Carson, have reflected on just that scenario and how likely it is. If anyone has any doubt about the potential of this, they need only to listen to his interview with Alan Combs or read the article in Communities Digital News. And finally, as of this date, voting has already begun through absentee ballots in certain states, such as North Carolina, which began voting on September 9th. What happens to those votes if the candidate withdraws or dies? Would the votes merely be attributed to the party's new choice, even if the individual voters found that person abhorrent? No one knows because there's no legal mechanism or precedent in place to cover such a scenario. Could they merely be discarded? Yes, potentially, but what kind of uproar and chaos would that cause among the electorate? It would cast doubt on the entire process, and that's the point. No matter what, ladies and gentlemen, there's a rough road ahead, and we'd better be ready for it. People, get ready.
People get ready. Jesus is coming. You don't need no baggage. You just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the Spirit calling. You don't need no ticket. You just